afternoon. How are you? As I begin to speak, I can feel the breeze, and it was calm a moment ago. Of course, isn't that the way? It's 53 degrees now. It's going to get cooler this evening. Humidity's 41, and Thomas Jefferson says the wind's at 10 miles an hour, and I think he's nailed it today. I think it is that. I think that the kind of news we can expect is the kind of assault that Trump would like to put together, on the theory that he could sort of explode our heads with the bad decisions he's making. If your measure of good and bad decisions is the people, all of the people, with equal justice for all, and that is not the measure of their success. Their success is taking care of their own, especially themselves. So let's take a sort of a walk through a couple of the appointments and things going on that I think tell us somewhat about the jungle that we're in, the corrupt jungle of Trump and his minions. So let's start with Stephen Miller. You remember he had that that narrow and hungry look all the time, like a Shakespearean character. And he's gotten a little chubbier, but they're putting him in as deputy chief of staff. And so he joins the inner sanctum where is the furor over the furor. And that's what we're going to be expecting, that he'll be, I guess, speaking and doing what he did before. The answer to these people will be groups. For example, civil liberties groups. Those who follow these issues and care about them. So they'll be on point. And the way to overwhelm the public is to give a list of things, and the immediate question for any fair-minded person is, how are we going to deal with that? And the answer is, it's not like everybody's left the playing field. They're here. And it's not like these aren't going to be onerous and terrible things. And the campaign is a blather machine. Things are said outrageous in the most ordinary campaign. But in this campaign, we can expect the White House to try to land fast and hard and try to demoralize people who are observing, and that will increase their chances as we leave the field, as they hope, if that's what happens, that they find an easier way to do in the nation, to compromise the republic, to compromise democracy. And, for example, in the category of wars and struggle and so forth, we've already talked about how Putin said, hey, I didn't talk to Trump. I don't know if he did or not. This is the problem when you have dueling liars. But out of the cabinet in Israel, we now have someone calling for the annexation of the West Bank. Those are fighting words given the history. And they're emboldened by the Trump administration to make such an outrageous statement. Now, a lot of people are going to find that what Trump says on the stump and to reporters is not always where he is when the dust settles. And the Come to Jesus meetings that he's having with Monk and so forth, I don't think is Musk. Oh, this is terrible. You so try to blot these people out of your mind, they creep into it in funny ways. So there'll be a bunch of issues. Another one that I don't hear us talk about is something like minority-owned contractors. Is this the end of affirmative action for them? We talk about giving jobs to the middle class and to people. What are we going to do about that? And then the appointments. Besides something like Miller, what do you think about Rubio for Secretary of State? And why would that happen? And where does that come from? The thing that I would guess at is not that he's doing this so DeSantis can replace him. In other words, DeSantis would then go to the Senate if Rubio left the Senate to go and become Secretary of State. And a bunch of names are being floated around, but you may have noticed that Ivanka Trump and her husband have spent $24 million on a house in Florida. And they just about finished it, if I remember the last story I read on the subject. I've not been invited to their house for crumpets. And it seemed to me Dad couldn't find a better way to have a holding pattern than to have her take that Senate seat. She'll hold it for herself, hold it for somebody else, who knows. But I would be surprised if we don't hear any names that involve the Trumps for that Senate seat in Florida. Now, you may have seen the other day, they continue the slanders, they being Trump and the machine. And so what they want to do is run down the people that are respected by the voters and the people in the combine that was the Harris campaign. And so there was a story that Oprah Winfrey had gotten money, $1 million, to throw her support. Well, Oprah today came out and said, I got no money for that from the Harris campaign. So you see, they put these things out there so it's in the ether. And so they're always punching at the credibility of individuals, even while they're taking broad, terrible policy steps to overcome the nation as it exists, to make it into what it will become. Another example, you may remember Crazy Cricket Kristi Noem, and she was a person who, if you remember, she put out a book when she was being considered as a possible vice presidential candidate, and she talked about killing her animal and bragging about it, kind of, and said all sorts of terrible things. Well, they want to put her up for the head of the Homeland Security. Well, we know she's good at caging mammals. We're going to see what she's prepared to do with people. And then there's this overarching thing about the law that on a daily basis, we see none of the figures that could move the dial stand up and say what needs to be said. So, for example, we have the not-so-special counsel talking about ways to turn down one federal case against Trump. We have now a new development, and it is that the judge in the state case, the DA case, which is about the hush money case, well, that judge is thinking of pausing the case and allowing certain papers to be filed on November 19th, and it's not clear whether the sentencing is on for November 26th. So how do we make sense out of this mishigas? And the answer is we have to look for our opportunities, if you will. And there'll be plenty. And this storm that they're creating to overwhelm the public with announcements for the cabinet and terrible practices they intend to institute is to break the will and the strength and the backs of those people who aggressively resisted and fought them in the recent campaign. And I still think, just knowing Trump, that things will come out, things we don't know about. But they'll be doing everything they can to keep that stuff undercover as Trump and his gang goes forward. So what are we to do? Well, first of all, we got to take care of ourselves. We can't be in the fetal position anymore. We have to get up out of the fetal position. I'm sorry, there's a little bit of humor, but obviously, myself included, it's very upsetting to see a throwback to the Hitler era establishing himself as the president of the free world in an unfree way. And any of us who care and worked and despise any notion of government that is by fiat instead of by the voice of the people, instead of a republic that represent the people, that's daunting. And we have created, if you will, a blended society that has to do with taking care of our people. At the same time, we provide opportunities. So there's social justice and there's capitalism. And at our best, we blend these two things. And if we have a message, that's our message. A secondary message is we have to have this conversation because the person who is, if you will, the true enemy of the people, has been elected president. And he didn't overnight become a good person by being elected. He remains the same person who was bad. And if we want to take the nation at its word, if this is what they want, then we have to resist it, because this is wrong. There's even a renewed move in Texas for them to secede. And some would say good riddance to bad rubbish. But this is the turmoil we're going to go through, trying to get our handle on what their objectives are. But their objectives are to hit fast and hard, and to not give us a chance to breathe. Trump is very much the person who deals, because of Roy Cohn and other historical tramps, very much the person to delay things that would constrain him and act with speed to get what he wants. I do say, as a counsel in a criminal case, justice delayed is justice when it's legitimate. And the legitimacy is that the government packs together a case and then hurls it before you have a chance to get your footing. So when it worked for Trump, and it did, and people were agreeable to his misconduct, he stalled all these different proceedings. He attacked various people, and no one stood up and said, no, that's wrong, not in the way it was necessary. And always thinking, somehow it'll work out at the polls. And it wouldn't surprise me, we find that there was a heft to the polls, but we don't have that information yet. It's just very hard to figure out the math. It doesn't make sense. That doesn't mean it's untrue. So what we have to do is, in the small and large ways we may, invest ourselves in talking and working toward a sensible future for this nation. The need that we may have to take care of ourselves, to deal with our own stress from these terrible results, we have to do that too. And if you have to stop reading or worrying about what's going on until you're moving mass and flesh and psychology and bloodstreams can accommodate this disaster, then you take care of yourself. You have to take care of yourself. But as you gather strength, if you feel that you're up to it, you have to take the small steps to mix into it. As a guy who lost a congressional race many years ago, and it may have been a favor to the choices I made with the rest of my life. Of course, I didn't think that at the time. It was a period of accommodation, and good candidates don't get, in my opinion, to deal with their own hurt, because they should be taking care of their supporters first. When you know you've lost or you have lost, you got to take care of your supporters. You can't pretend your opponent is a better person than you ever said, because that would be an admission that you were not telling the truth. But it's demanding, if you invest yourself in something, that you care for it, that if it's not achieved, it's a body blow. And you have to allow yourself to recover from that, to be useful to yourself and your family. And if you get involved in politics again, it's an absolute necessary predicate. And the best people do that. And I think in this walking, talking conversation we're having, based on all the responses I've seen now over the years and the thousands of small tapes we've made, there's a good bunch of people on this Dirt Road gang. And I think of us as more elegant than that, but I don't know. I don't want to be too Tony about it. It is a dirt road after all. So I want to thank you guys and gals and anybody who follows this stuff. I'm not stopping it. And let's keep this up as much as you can, and I'll continue my reports and try to alert you to what I think is going on. And I got a call about appearing on a radio show, and I may do that, and if I do, I'll give you the link. But you won't be surprised, because I'll probably say things I'm saying to you now. So for the time being, I say good evening to you from my Cathedral of Trees on this chillier day. Bye-bye.